Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
I stared at my phone screen in complete shock, reading the Facebook message over and over again. My mother, Linda, had just sent me a demand for a wedding invitation after 16 years of silence. 16 years since she walked out and chose her new husband, Derek, and his twin daughters over me, her own son. The message read like a threat wrapped in fake sentiment. Grayson, I deserve to be at your wedding because family comes first. I raised you, and I have every right to witness this milestone. If you don't send me a proper invitation by tomorrow, I'll show up anyway. Love, Mom. Emma looked up from her wedding dress fitting schedule and asked what was wrong. I couldn't even speak. The memories came flooding back as I set my phone down with trembling hands. My parents divorced when I was 10 years old, and at first everything seemed like it would work out fine. Dad got the apartment above Murphy's auto shop where he worked as a mechanic, and Mom got to start fresh. That fresh start came in the form of Derek Thompson, a wealthy contractor who lived in the upscale Riverside neighborhood with his 8-year-old twin daughters Stephanie and Sarah. Looking back now, I can see how calculated everything was. Mom started spending more and more time at Derek's sprawling colonial house with its manicured lawn and 3-car garage. She would pick me up from school and drive me straight to Derek's place where I felt like an outsider from day one. Stephanie and Sarah had their own playroom, their own bedrooms decorated with expensive furniture, and a father who treated them like princesses. I slept on an air mattress in Derek's home office when I stayed over. The twins made it clear I didn't belong. They would whisper to each other when I entered a room, roll their eyes when I tried to join their conversations, and complain to Derek when I touched any of their toys or games. Derek never corrected them. Instead, he would give me awkward pats on the shoulder and suggest I give the girls some space to adjust. Mom always took their side, explaining that I needed to be more understanding, because this was a big change for everyone. When I turned 12, Mom sat me down at the kitchen table in our old apartment and delivered the news that would shatter my world. She explained that Derek wasn't comfortable with me living at his house full-time because it would disrupt Stephanie and Sarah's routine. They needed stability, she said, and having a teenage boy around was too much change, too fast. She promised it was temporary, just until everyone got used to the new family dynamic. I believed her. I actually believed that my own mother was making a temporary sacrifice that would eventually reunite us. Dad tried to hide his anger, but I could see it in the way his jaw clenched and his hands formed fists when he thought I wasn't looking. He never said a word against Mom, though. He just bought me new sheets for my permanent bedroom and started learning how to cook meals that weren't sandwiches or cereal. The visits became less frequent almost immediately. Mom would show up with guilt gifts, expensive sneakers, or video games that she clearly hadn't picked out herself. Derek would stay in the car engine running, checking his watch while she spent exactly 30 minutes asking superficial questions about school and friends. She missed my 8th grade graduation ceremony because Derek's daughters had a dance recital the same night. She missed my first varsity football game because they were taking a family vacation to Cancun. By my 16th birthday, the visits had stopped entirely. Whenever I called Mom's cell phone, Derek would answer with his cold, professional voice. "Linda's busy with family stuff right now," he would say, as if I wasn't part of that family. "I'll tell her you called." She never called back. When I tried calling the house phone, Stephanie or Sarah would pick up and either hang up immediately or tell me their mom was too busy with important things to talk. The abandonment wasn't gradual, it was surgical. One day I had a mother who claimed to love me, and the next day I was completely erased from her life. Dad worked double shifts to afford my school supplies and football equipment. Mrs. Rodriguez from the apartment next door taught me how to cook basic meals because Dad was working late most nights. Coach Martinez became my father figure during high school, driving me to college recruitment meetings when Dad couldn't get time off work. But the real truth about Mom's abandonment didn't come to light until last week, when I was packing Dad's belongings for storage before Emma and I moved into our new house. Hidden in a shoebox beneath his winter coats, I found a stack of letters Mom had written to Dad during their divorce proceedings. My hands shook as I read them, discovering the calculated nature of her betrayal. One letter dated just 3 months after she met Derek laid out her strategy in black and white. Paul, I need to prioritize my future happiness. And Derek has made it clear that having Grayson around reminds him this isn't really a clean slate. I can't risk losing this opportunity for financial security and a real family. Grayson will be fine with you, and honestly, this arrangement works better for everyone involved. Another letter written a month before she told me about the temporary living arrangement revealed the complete truth. I've decided that the best thing for everyone is if Grayson stays with you permanently. Derek's girls need their mother's full attention right now, and I can't be torn between my past and my future. I'm going to tell Grayson it's temporary so he doesn't make a scene, but we both know this is the right long-term solution. The abandonment wasn't Derek's demand. It wasn't about his daughters needing stability. It was Mom's calculated decision to trade her son for financial security and social status. She had planned my erasure from her life with the same care most people use to plan vacations. Reading those letters felt like being abandoned all over again, but this time with the full knowledge that every promise, every reassurance, every "I love you" during those final months had been a deliberate lie. I sat on Dad's old couch surrounded by boxes and memories, and finally understood that the mother I had spent 16 years missing had never existed in the first place. The woman who raised me for 12 years had been capable of this level of deception and manipulation from the very beginning. That realization should have been devastating. But instead it felt oddly liberating. I wasn't losing a mother. I was finally seeing clearly the person who had chosen to lose me. The morning of our wedding rehearsal arrived with perfect October weather, crisp air, and golden sunshine filtering through the ancient oak trees at Willowbrook Gardens. Emma's family, the Castellis, had been setting up decorations since dawn, transforming the outdoor ceremony space into something magical. Emma's father, Tony, was adjusting the white wooden arch, while her mother, Maria, directed cousins and aunts in hanging string lights between the branches. I felt incredibly grateful watching them work. The Castellis had welcomed me into their loud, warm, chaotic Italian-American family from the moment Emma brought me home 3 years ago. Tony treated me like the son he never had, teaching me about construction and home repair during weekend projects. Maria insisted on calling me my boy, and never let me leave their house without containers of leftover lasagna or meatballs. Their acceptance felt especially precious given my own family history. Dad arrived early looking uncomfortable but proud in his rented Navy suit. He stood quietly near the ceremony chairs, watching the controlled chaos of wedding preparation with the same careful attention he gave to engine repairs. Mrs. Rodriguez had helped him pick out a new tie, and Coach Martinez had driven over from the next town to make sure Dad felt supported. These were the people who had actually raised me, who had shown up consistently for 16 years without asking for anything in return. Emma looked radiant, directing the final setup, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing jeans and an old college sweatshirt. She caught my eye and smiled the same smile that had made me fall in love with her during our sophomore engineering lab. We had built something real together, something based on honesty and mutual respect, rather than convenience or calculation. That peaceful morning shattered the moment a black BMW pulled into the gravel parking area. I felt my stomach drop as I recognized the expensive car and the vanity license plate that read D. Thompson. Derek stepped out first, wearing an obviously expensive gray suit and sunglasses despite the overcast sky. Then came the twins Stephanie and Sarah, now 24 years old, and dressed in matching white cocktail dresses that were completely inappropriate for an afternoon outdoor wedding. Finally, Mom emerged from the passenger seat like she was walking a red carpet. She wore a burgundy dress that probably cost more than Dad's monthly rent, complete with matching heels and jewelry that caught the light with every movement. Her blonde hair was professionally styled, and her makeup looked like she had just stepped out of a salon. She looked exactly like what she had always wanted to be, the wealthy contractor's wife who belonged in the Riverside neighborhood. Mom spotted me immediately and rushed over with arms outstretched, tears already forming in her eyes. "Grayson, my sweet boy," she exclaimed loudly enough for everyone in the vicinity to hear. "I couldn't bear to miss my only son's special day. I know we've had our challenges, but family is family, and nothing could keep me away from this moment." The performance was flawless. Her voice carried the perfect mixture of maternal love and regret, designed to make anyone listening think she had been a devoted mother who had somehow been kept away from her beloved son. She wrapped me in a hug that smelled of expensive perfume and felt completely foreign, nothing like the hugs I remembered from childhood. "I'd like you to meet your sisters," Mom continued, gesturing towards Stephanie and Sarah with obvious pride. "They've missed you terribly over the years and are so excited to finally be part of your special day." The twins offered weak smiles and half-hearted waves, clearly uncomfortable with the charade, but going along with Mom's script. Derek approached, more slowly extending his hand for a formal handshake. "Congratulations, Grayson," he said in his practiced business voice. "Linda insisted we come support her son, and I'm glad we could make it work with our schedule." His choice of words made it clear that this wasn't his idea, and that he considered it an inconvenience rather than a joyful reunion. Emma appeared at my side, her earlier happiness replaced by protective concern. I introduced her to Mom, who immediately launched into another performance about how proud she was, and how she had always known I would find someone wonderful. She gushed about Emma's dress, the beautiful venue, and what a handsome couple we made, speaking as if she had been involved in our relationship from the beginning. The twins wandered around the setup area, looking bored and entitled, making loud comments about the outdoor ceremony. "I hope they have bug spray," Stephanie said to Sarah. "This nature thing is so uncomfortable. Why didn't they just rent a hotel ballroom like normal people?" Sarah responded by asking if there was a kids' table where they could sit instead of having to make conversation with strangers. Mom positioned herself strategically near the guest seating area and began introducing herself to arriving family members and friends as Grayson's mother. I watched in horror as she told Emma's Aunt Catherine about how proud she was of my engineering career, how she had always known I was destined for great things, and how wonderful it was to finally meet Emma's lovely family. The lies came so smoothly that I almost wondered if Mom had convinced herself they were true. She told Emma's cousin Michael about teaching me to drive, helping me with college applications, and being so worried when I broke my leg playing football junior year. Every single story was fabricated. Dad had taught me to drive in the auto shop parking lot. My guidance counselor, Mrs. Patterson, had helped with college applications. Mom had never even called when I broke my leg. Derek circulated among the men, discussing his construction business and making polite conversation about the wedding venue. He seemed more comfortable in this role, playing the successful businessman, rather than dealing with family drama. He made subtle comments about finally getting to know my stepson and looking forward to building a relationship that made it sound like I had been the one avoiding contact all these years. The situation reached peak absurdity when Mom asked Emma's cousin Lisa, who was serving as our wedding photographer, to take some family photos before the ceremony. She positioned herself prominently in the center, flanked by Derek and the twins, and gestured for me to join them, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. Dad stood about 10 feet away, clearly excluded from Mom's definition of family. Watching this performance, with an expression I had never seen before. "We should get some shots of 3 generations," Mom announced cheerfully, completely ignoring the fact that she hadn't been part of my life for 16 years. "This is such a special day, and family photos are so important for preserving memories." She spoke as if she had been present for my graduation, my first job, my engagement, and every other milestone she had actually missed. Lisa looked confused and glanced at me for direction. I felt paralyzed, caught between not wanting to create a scene at my own wedding and not wanting to participate in Mom's elaborate fiction. Emma squeezed my hand tightly, her support giving me strength, but I still couldn't find the words to set the record straight. The final straw came when Mom started rearranging the ceremony seating to accommodate her family. She moved chairs around to create a prominent section in the second row for herself, Derek and the twins, completely disrupting Emma's carefully planned arrangements. She spoke loudly to other guests about how excited she was and how proud she felt positioning herself as the central maternal figure in my life. Dad continued to stand alone, watching his ex-wife rewrite 16 years of history in front of people who actually mattered to us. His face showed a mixture of pain, anger, and resignation that broke my heart. Here was the man who had actually raised me, who had sacrificed everything to give me a good life, being erased by the woman who had chosen to abandon us both. The wedding ceremony began an hour later, with Mom prominently positioned in her self-assigned seat in the second row, having successfully rearranged the entire family section to accommodate her version of reality. She wore her maternal pride like costume jewelry, sparkling and obvious, and completely artificial. Derek sat beside her, checking his phone intermittently, while the twins whispered complaints about the outdoor temperature and the length of traditional wedding ceremonies. Dad sat alone in the front row where he belonged, looking dignified, despite everything. His hands were folded carefully in his lap, and his attention focused completely on me and Emma as we prepared to start our new life together. Mrs. Rodriguez sat behind him with her husband, along with Coach Martinez and his wife and several neighbors who had actually been part of my upbringing. These were my real family, the people who had shown up consistently without fanfare or expectation. Pastor Williams from Emma's childhood church began the ceremony with a warm welcome to all the guests. He spoke about the joy of witnessing two people commit their lives to each other, surrounded by the love and support of family and friends. As he talked about the importance of family bonds and lifelong commitment, I caught Mom nodding enthusiastically, as if his words validated her sudden reappearance in my life. Emma walked down the aisle, looking absolutely stunning in her grandmother's vintage lace dress, carrying a bouquet of white roses and baby's breath that Maria had arranged that morning. Tony escorted her with obvious pride, his eyes misty as he prepared to give his daughter to the man he considered a son. The sight of Emma approaching filled me with such happiness that I almost forgot about the drama unfolding in the audience behind me. But Mom made forgetting impossible. Throughout the early part of the ceremony, she provided whispered commentary to nearby guests, pointing out details about my appearance and personality, as if she possessed intimate knowledge of my adult life. She told Emma's cousin Janet about how I had always been such a handsome boy, and how she could see so much of his father in him, conveniently omitting that Paul was sitting right in front of her. She claimed credit for my posture, my speaking voice, and my choice of career, weaving an elaborate fiction that positioned her as the primary influence in my development. I always encouraged his interest in building and engineering, she whispered to anyone who would listen. I knew from the time he was small that he was destined for something special in the technical field. The lies were so audacious that I began to wonder if Mom had somehow convinced herself they were true. Maybe 16 years of absence had been rewritten in her memory as 16 years of long-distance maternal guidance. Maybe she genuinely believed she deserved credit for the man I had become, despite having contributed nothing to the process of becoming him. Pastor Williams moved through the traditional elements of the ceremony with practiced grace, speaking about love commitment and the sacred nature of marriage vows. He talked about how successful marriages are built on foundations of trust, honesty, and mutual support, qualities that Emma and I had spent 3 years developing together. His words felt especially meaningful, given the contrast between our authentic relationship and the manufactured drama playing out in the audience. When we reached the exchange of rings, Mom actually gasped audibly as Emma slipped the gold band onto my finger. "My baby is all grown up," she announced in a stage whisper that carried across the entire ceremony space. Several guests turned to look at her, some with confusion, and others with obvious irritation at the disruption. The twins grew increasingly restless as the ceremony continued, checking their phones repeatedly and making faces at each other about having to sit through what they clearly considered boring adult proceedings. Stephanie complained loudly enough for nearby guests to hear that her feet hurt in her heels and that outdoor weddings were so impractical. Sarah wondered aloud why we couldn't have done something quick and simple instead of all this formal stuff. Derek maintained his businessman facade, nodding politely when other guests made eye contact, but remaining largely disconnected from the emotional significance of the moment. He seemed to view the entire event as a social obligation rather than a meaningful family milestone, which was probably the most honest response from Mom's side of the assembled group. As Pastor Williams moved toward the traditional moment for objections, I felt a strange sense of foreboding. Something about Mom's behavior throughout the morning had been building toward a crescendo, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't finished with her performance. If there is anyone here who knows of any reason why Grayson and Emma should not be joined in marriage, Pastor Williams announced in his ceremonial voice, "Let them speak now or forever, hold their peace." The words hung in the autumn air for what should have been a moment of respectful silence. Instead, Mom actually stood up from her seat, smoothing down her burgundy dress and clearing her throat as if she had been waiting for this exact moment. The entire gathering froze in collective shock. Emma's hand tightened around mine, and I felt my heart stop beating for what felt like several seconds. Pastor Williams looked confused and concerned, clearly unprepared for anyone to actually respond to what was typically a ceremonial formality. "I don't object to this beautiful union," Mom began in a voice that projected clearly across the silent ceremony space. "But I do want to say something important about family and sacrifice." She had obviously prepared this speech, and she delivered it with the confidence of someone who believed she was performing a noble gesture. 16 years ago, I made the most difficult decision any mother can make. She continued, her voice taking on the tone of someone sharing a profound sacrifice. "I allowed my son to live with his father so that he could develop the independence and strength he would need to become the incredible man standing before us today." The manipulation was breathtaking in its audacity. With a few carefully chosen words, Mom had transformed her abandonment into deliberate parenting strategy, her absence into loving sacrifice. She positioned herself as the architect of my character development, the wise mother who had known exactly what her son needed even when it meant personal heartbreak. Every day for 16 years, I fought the urge to interfere with that process. She continued building momentum like a politician delivering a campaign speech. I watched from a distance as Paul did an admirable job raising our son, but I always knew that my decision to step back was the right one. I gave Grayson the space he needed to become strong, independent, and capable of building the kind of loving relationship we're celebrating today. The speech was masterful in its deception, reframing every aspect of our history to cast Mom as the selfless hero rather than the abandoning parent. She made it sound like she had been secretly monitoring my progress and celebrating my achievements from afar, rather than simply forgetting I existed while building her new life. "I couldn't be prouder of the man my son has become," she concluded, gesturing toward me with obvious pride. "And I'm so grateful that Emma's wonderful family is welcoming him with open arms. This is exactly the kind of happiness I dreamed of when I made those difficult sacrifices all those years ago." She then gestured for Derek and the twins to stand with her in a show of family unity, creating a tableau that positioned her as the central maternal figure while completely excluding Dad and everyone who had actually contributed to raising me. The visual statement was clear: she was claiming ownership of my success, while erasing the people who had actually made it possible. Pastor William stood in stunned silence, clearly unsure how to respond to such an unprecedented interruption. Emma looked furious, her face flushed with anger at watching someone try to hijack our wedding ceremony for their own agenda. Dad's expression had shifted from resignation to something much harder, as if 16 years of suppressed anger were finally reaching the surface. The gathered guests sat in uncomfortable silence, unsure whether to applaud Mom's speech or object to the disruption. Emma's family looked confused and concerned, recognizing manipulation, but not understanding the full context. My actual support system, the neighbors and coaches and friends who knew the real story, sat with expressions of barely contained outrage. Mom remained standing with Derek and the twins flanking her, clearly expecting some kind of positive response to her performance. She had just rewritten 16 years of abandonment as loving sacrifice, and she seemed genuinely surprised that the audience wasn't moved by her noble story of maternal selflessness. The reception began with an undercurrent of tension that had nothing to do with normal wedding day nerves. Mom had managed to transform what should have been a celebration into a psychological battlefield, and she was winning through sheer audacity and careful manipulation. While Emma and I tried to focus on our first dance, Mom worked the room like a seasoned politician, approaching tables of guests with her carefully crafted story. She introduced herself to Emma's extended family as Grayson's mother, and immediately launched into elaborate tales that bore no resemblance to reality. She told Emma's grandmother about teaching Grayson his work ethic and instilling the values that made him such a good man. She shared fictional memories with Emma's aunts and uncles about supporting his education and being so proud when he got his engineering degree. The most painful part was watching guests believe her. People who didn't know our history had no reason to doubt the elegant, articulate woman who spoke with such apparent love and pride about her son. They nodded sympathetically when she mentioned the difficult years and seemed impressed by her sacrifice and strength in raising such a successful young man. Meanwhile, Dad sat quietly at a table with Mrs. Rodriguez, Coach Martinez, and a few longtime neighbors, looking increasingly isolated as Mom systematically erased his role in my upbringing. Every time someone asked about my childhood, Mom would swoop in with her revisionist version slowly but steadily, replacing the truth with her manufactured narrative. Derek mingled comfortably among the male guests, discussing his construction business and making strategic connections with Emma's male relatives who worked in related trades. He seemed much more comfortable in this networking role than dealing with family drama, and he made subtle comments that supported Mom's version of events without explicitly endorsing her claims. I'm just glad we could finally all be together as a family. He told Emma's Uncle Frank, a contractor who was interested in Derek's commercial projects. Linda has talked about Grayson so often over the years, and it's wonderful to finally meet the young man she's so proud of. His words implied years of family connection rather than complete absence. The twins complained constantly about everything from the music selection to the food choices, making it clear they considered this entire event an inconvenience. They sat at their assigned tables, scrolling through their phones and making disparaging comments about the outdoor venue, the casual atmosphere, and the weird family dynamics they were being forced to navigate. Stephanie loudly wondered why we hadn't hired a real DJ instead of using Emma's cousin's sound system, while Sarah complained that the buffet dinner was so informal compared to the elegant sit-down dinners they were used to at country club events. Their entitled behavior reflected the lifestyle Mom had chosen over maintaining a relationship with her own son. The breaking point began when Mom approached Emma's maid of honor, Jessica, during the cocktail hour. She immediately started sharing motherly wisdom about marriage, offering advice based on her supposed intimate knowledge of my personality and needs. She warned Jessica about my stubborn streak that comes from his father's side, and shared insights about my preferences and habits that were completely fabricated. Grayson has always been very particular about his routines. Mom explained to Jessica with the confidence of someone who had actually observed my adult behavior. He needs a lot of personal space to decompress, and he can be quite moody when things don't go according to his plans. These are things Emma will need to understand if their marriage is going to work. Jessica looked confused, since none of Mom's descriptions matched the person she had known for 3 years. But Mom continued dispensing marital advice with increasing confidence, positioning herself as the expert on my personality, despite not having spoken to me since I was 12 years old. The situation escalated further when Mom cornered Emma's cousin Lisa, who had been taking photographs throughout the reception. She began directing Lisa to capture specific family moments that portrayed her as the central maternal figure, requesting posed shots that would support her fictional narrative if anyone looked through the wedding album years later. "Make sure you get some good pictures of me with Grayson," Mom instructed Lisa with the authority of someone who had been planning this wedding for months. "These are the memories that really matter, and I want to make sure we document this special family reunion properly." She spoke as if this was a joyful reconciliation rather than an unwelcome intrusion. But the real confrontation began when Mom followed Emma into the bridal suite bathroom during the reception dinner. I was talking with Tony about our honeymoon plans when Emma emerged from the bathroom looking shaken and upset. She pulled me aside and whispered that she needed to talk to me privately about something important. In the quiet corner near the gift table, Emma told me what had happened in the bathroom. Mom had cornered her there and launched into a completely different version of our family history, one designed to position herself as the solution to problems she had actually created. She told me, "You have deep abandonment issues because your father was emotionally distant and buried himself in work after the divorce." Emma explained, her voice tight with anger. She said, "Paul never really knew how to connect with you emotionally, and that's why you sometimes have trouble expressing your feelings in relationships." The manipulation was sophisticated and cruel, taking the real effects of Mom's abandonment and blaming them on Dad, the man who had actually stepped up to raise me. Mom was trying to convince Emma that my occasional struggles with trust and emotional vulnerability were Paul's fault rather than the natural result of being abandoned by my mother. Then she offered to be there for both of us, now that she's ready to be the mother you always needed. Emma continued, barely controlling her fury. She wants to insert herself into our marriage as some kind of healing presence, like she's the answer to problems she claims your father created. The psychological manipulation was breathtaking in its complexity. Mom was simultaneously taking credit for my strengths while blaming Dad for my weaknesses, positioning herself as both the source of everything good about me and the solution to everything that might be challenging. She was trying to gaslight Emma about our entire relationship while setting herself up as an indispensable family resource. Emma had seen right through the manipulation, but the fact that Mom had attempted it at all revealed the depth of her delusional thinking. She genuinely seemed to believe she could waltz back into my life after 16 years and assume a central role in my marriage, my future, and my emotional well-being. She kept talking about family healing and second chances, Emma continued, but everything she said was designed to make you sound damaged and make her sound essential. It was like listening to someone try to sell me a product I never wanted by convincing me I had a problem I didn't know I had. As Emma recounted the bathroom conversation, I realized that Mom's entire appearance at our wedding was part of a larger campaign to re-enter my life on her terms. She wasn't seeking reconciliation or forgiveness. She was attempting a hostile takeover of my adult relationships using psychological manipulation and carefully crafted lies. The most disturbing part was how calculated it all seemed. Mom had clearly spent time researching my life, learning enough details to create convincing stories while remaining completely ignorant of who I actually was as a person. She knew my job title, but not my work ethic. She knew I was getting married, but not what kind of person Emma was. She had gathered enough surface information to fake intimacy, while remaining fundamentally disconnected from my actual experience. Standing there with Emma in our wedding reception, watching Mom continue her performance for anyone willing to listen, I finally understood that this wasn't about love or family or second chances. This was about control image management and whatever personal agenda had motivated her to break 16 years of silence with a Facebook demand rather than a humble request. The reception had been underway for nearly 2 hours when Dad's face suddenly went pale, and he pressed his hand against his chest while reaching for the back of his chair. Mrs. Rodriguez immediately noticed his distress and called out for help, her voice cutting through the dinner conversation and background music. I rushed to Dad's side as he lowered himself carefully back into his seat, his breathing shallow and his skin clammy with perspiration. Emma was right behind me, already pulling out her phone to call for medical assistance, while several guests formed a concerned circle around our table. "Dr. Rodriguez is here," someone called out, referring to Emma's cousin who worked as a cardiologist at the regional medical center. He pushed through the gathered crowd and immediately began checking Dad's pulse and blood pressure, asking calm, professional questions about chest pain and shortness of breath. Dad insisted he was fine, just overwhelmed by the excitement and emotion of the day. But Dr. Rodriguez took the situation seriously and recommended that someone drive him to the hospital for a proper evaluation. The stress of watching Mom rewrite 16 years of history in front of everyone who mattered to us had clearly taken a physical toll on the man who had actually raised me. Mom appeared at the edge of the crowd like she had been shot from a cannon, pushing past other guests to insert herself into the medical emergency. "That's my family too," she announced loudly, as if Dad's health crisis was somehow about her relationship with him rather than his relationship with me. She immediately began giving unsolicited advice to Dr. Rodriguez, suggesting medications and treatments based on her supposed knowledge of Dad's medical history. She positioned herself as if she was his concerned co-parent, rather than his ex-wife, who hadn't spoken to him in 16 years, taking charge of the situation with the authority of someone who had remained involved in his life. "Paul has always been stubborn about taking care of himself," she announced to the gathered guests, speaking as if she possessed current information about his health and habits. "I've been worried about his stress levels for years, especially with him working so hard to support Grayson through college and everything." The performance was vintage Mom transforming someone else's crisis into an opportunity to showcase her supposed caring and insight. She acted as if Dad's medical episode was validation of concerns she had been harboring privately, rather than acknowledging that she had no recent knowledge of his health or lifestyle. Dr. Rodriguez worked efficiently to stabilize Dad while coordinating transportation to the hospital for further evaluation. Mom continued hovering around the medical response, offering commentary and suggestions that made it clear she was more interested in appearing helpful than actually being helpful. But then disaster struck for Mom's carefully constructed narrative. The DJ's wireless microphone system, which had been turned off during dinner, accidentally activated when someone bumped into the sound equipment while clearing space for the medical emergency. Mom's voice suddenly projected clearly through the reception speakers as she turned to Derek and said in a voice filled with calculated satisfaction, "Perfect timing. Now I look like the caring one who stepped up during a crisis. This actually helps our case." The entire reception fell into stunned silence as Mom's words echoed across the outdoor space. Guests stopped mid-conversation and stared in shock at the sound system, then at Mom, as they realized they had just heard her true motivation broadcast to everyone present. Derek frantically gestured for her to stop talking, clearly recognizing the disaster unfolding. But Mom continued speaking directly into the accidentally activated microphone. "Everyone can see that I'm the one taking charge and showing real concern for family. This makes Paul look fragile and me look strong." The psychological manipulation that had been hidden behind Mom's performance all day was suddenly exposed in her own words. She was using Dad's medical emergency as a strategic opportunity to enhance her image, rather than responding with genuine concern for his well-being. Dad, despite his medical episode and the chaos surrounding him, looked up at Mom with a clarity that cut through 16 years of suppressed anger and disappointment. His voice was weak, but perfectly audible as he said, 16 years? 16 years I never said a word against you because I didn't want Grayson to hate his mother. But you just showed everyone exactly who you are. His words hit the reception like a thunderbolt, confirming what many guests had begun to suspect about Mom's true character. Dad had spent 16 years protecting Mom's reputation in my eyes, never poisoning me against her, despite having every right to expose her abandonment and manipulation. Emma's father, Tony, who had been watching Mom's performance with increasing suspicion throughout the evening, stepped forward and addressed her directly in front of all the assembled guests. "When exactly did you last see your son before today?" he asked with the directness of a man who recognized manipulation and had no patience for it. The question hung in the air like a challenge, forcing Mom to either tell the truth or double down on her lies in front of people who were already questioning her credibility. Her carefully constructed narrative was crumbling in real time as guests began asking the questions she had hoped to avoid. Derek, clearly embarrassed by the public exposure of Mom's calculating behavior, told her they should leave immediately to avoid further humiliation. But Mom, perhaps realizing that her grand performance was falling apart, refused to retreat gracefully. "We're not going anywhere." She snapped at Derek in front of everyone, her mask of maternal concern slipping to reveal the entitled manipulation underneath. "I have every right to be at my son's wedding, and these people need to understand that I'm his mother, regardless of what anyone says about the past." Her angry response confirmed what the accidentally broadcast conversation had already revealed. Mom wasn't motivated by love, reconciliation, or genuine family feeling. She was driven by a sense of entitlement to the benefits of motherhood without having fulfilled any of the responsibilities of raising a child. The medical situation with Dad stabilized as Dr. Rodriguez determined that stress and emotional overwhelm had caused the episode rather than a serious cardiac event. But the social situation with Mom had exploded beyond any possibility of repair, with her true character exposed to everyone who mattered in my adult life. Standing there surrounded by people who actually loved and supported me, watching Mom's performance collapse under the weight of her own manipulation, I realized that this moment was exactly what I had needed without knowing it. For 16 years, I had wondered if I was somehow responsible for my mother's absence. Now everyone could see that her behavior had nothing to do with my worthiness and everything to do with her character. With Dad stable and resting in a chair, while Dr. Rodriguez monitored his condition and the reception crowd still processing what they had heard over the sound system, I realized that 16 years of silence and confusion were finally coming to an end. Mom stood defiantly near the DJ booth, her burgundy dress wrinkled from the drama, and her carefully styled hair showing the effects of stress and anger. I walked over to the sound system and asked for the microphone, something I had never planned to do at my own wedding reception. The gathered guests, including Emma's extended family and my longtime neighbors and friends, turned their attention toward me with expressions of concern, curiosity, and support. "I want to thank everyone for being here today." I began, my voice carrying clearly across the outdoor reception space. "This should have been a simple celebration of love and new beginnings, but instead you've all witnessed something I've been dealing with privately for 16 years. I looked directly at Mom as I continued, seeing her confident expression falter as she realized I was finally going to tell the truth she had worked so hard to obscure. Derek moved closer to her, clearly uncomfortable with the public nature of the confrontation, while the twins looked mortified at being associated with the unfolding drama. "The woman who introduced herself as my mother today abandoned me when I was 12 years old," I said, letting the simple fact hang in the air before providing context. "She didn't sacrifice herself for my development or step back to give me space to grow. She chose her new husband's family over her own son, and then disappeared from my life completely. I explained how Mom had gradually moved me out of her daily routine, spending more and more time at Derek's house, while making me feel increasingly unwelcome. I described the promises she made about temporary arrangements and gradual adjustment promises that were lies designed to make her abandonment easier to execute. My father Paul worked double shifts to afford my school clothes and football equipment. I continued gesturing toward Dad, who was listening with obvious emotion despite his medical episode. Mrs. Rodriguez taught me to cook when Dad was working late. Coach Martinez drove me to college recruitment meetings when Dad couldn't get time off work. These people raised me, not the woman who spent this evening claiming credit for their sacrifice and dedication. The contrast between Mom's claims and the reality of my upbringing became stark as I detailed specific moments she had missed. I talked about Dad sleeping in the hospital chair for 3 days when I broke my arm, never leaving my side. Despite having to miss work, he couldn't afford to lose. I described how he cried in the audience when I graduated from engineering school, proud of achievements he had made possible through years of financial sacrifice. I explained how I learned to forge Mom's signature on permission slips because she was never available to sign them, and how I stopped asking Dad about her visits because the disappointment was too painful for both of us. I detailed the gradual realization that my mother had simply moved on to a new life that didn't include her first son. She didn't know I was studying engineering until she Facebook stalked me to demand a wedding invitation. I said, addressing the audience, but speaking directly to Mom. She doesn't know what kind of person I became, what challenges I faced, or what achievements I accomplished, because she chose not to be part of any of it. Mom tried to interrupt, claiming I was being unfair and that she had done her best under difficult circumstances. She attempted to blame Derek and his daughters, saying they needed stability and she had to make impossible choices for the good of everyone involved. But I continued speaking methodically, dismantling every claim she had made throughout the evening. I revealed how she had told Emma's family about teaching me to drive when Dad had actually done that in the auto shop parking lot after hours. I exposed her lies about helping with college applications when Mrs. Patterson, my guidance counselor, had spent dozens of hours helping me navigate the process Dad couldn't understand. She told people tonight about being worried when I broke my leg playing football. I said, my voice growing stronger with each revealed lie. She never called, she never visited, she never even knew it happened until someone from Dad's neighborhood mentioned it months later. The audience listened in stunned silence as I laid out 16 years of absence and abandonment, contrasting it with Mom's elaborate performance throughout the wedding day. Emma's family began to understand why they had felt uncomfortable with Mom's claims, while my longtime supporters nodded in recognition of the truth they had lived alongside me. Derek looked increasingly uncomfortable as the full scope of Mom's deception became clear to everyone present. He had clearly been operating under a different version of our family history, one that painted Mom as the victim of circumstances rather than the architect of abandonment. But then Mom revealed the depth of her delusion and entitlement in a way that shocked even me. Realizing she was losing control of the narrative completely, she shifted tactics and made a threat that exposed her true motivations for reconnecting. Paul won't be around forever, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, gesturing toward my father with casual dismissiveness. As Grayson's biological mother, I have legal rights to family assets and inheritance decisions that can't be changed by 16 years of hurt feelings. The mercenary nature of her sudden reappearance became crystal clear with those words. She hadn't come to our wedding seeking reconciliation or forgiveness. She had come to establish her legal position for future financial claims, using our special day as a public platform to assert parental rights she had abandoned years ago. I've been researching Grayson's engineering salary and Paul's savings. She continued, apparently believing that honesty about her motives would somehow strengthen her position. I deserve compensation for the sacrifices I made, and I won't be shut out of decisions that affect my son's future just because some people can't understand the complexity of family relationships." Derek looked horrified as Mom revealed her calculated approach to our family's modest financial resources. He stepped away from her, slightly clearly recognizing that her agenda was far more manipulative than he had understood. The twins looked embarrassed and angry, realizing their evening had been ruined by what they now saw as Linda's transparent greed. Mom's final demand was the most revealing of all. "You need to show proper respect for everything I gave up for you," she said, her voice rising with entitled anger. "I'm your mother regardless of what anyone thinks about my choices, and you owe me acknowledgement and inclusion in your life, whether you like it or not." Standing there with the microphone in my hand, surrounded by people who had actually loved and supported me for 16 years, I realized that this moment was exactly what I needed to finally close the door on a relationship that had ended when I was 12 years old. Mom had exposed her true character more completely than I ever could have, and everyone who mattered to me had witnessed the revelation. The silence that followed Mom's demands felt profound and decisive, like the moment after thunder when you realize the storm has passed. Emma stepped forward and gently took the microphone from my hand, her presence steady and supportive, as she prepared to address the situation with the clarity I was still struggling to find. "I've heard enough tonight to understand exactly what kind of person you are," Emma said, speaking directly to Mom with calm authority that cut through all the drama and manipulation. "You abandoned your 12-year-old son, stayed away for 16 years, and then showed up at his wedding uninvited to take credit for the man other people raised." Emma's voice carried the confidence of someone who had grown up in a loving family and could recognize dysfunction when she encountered it. She wasn't intimidated by Mom's performance, or Derek's wealth, or the twins' entitled behavior. She was simply stating facts with the directness that comes from genuine moral clarity. "Neither you nor your husband nor his daughters will ever be welcome in our home or around our future children." Emma continued her words, carrying the finality of someone making a permanent decision. "Your threats about inheritance and legal rights were recorded by multiple guests on their phones, and any harassment of my husband or his father will be met with restraining orders." Emma's father, Tony, stood up from his table, his expression serious as he addressed Mom with the authority of a successful businessman who had dealt with manipulative people throughout his career. "Your threats about legal rights and inheritance were heard by everyone here," he said firmly. "If you attempt any harassment or legal action against my new son or his father, my family will make sure you have more legal problems than you can handle." The support from Emma's family felt overwhelming in the best possible way. These people had known me for 3 years, but they were prepared to protect me and Dad with the fierce loyalty they showed their own blood relatives. Their acceptance wasn't conditional on DNA or legal obligations. It was based on character consistency and genuine care. Dad managed to stand up with Dr. Rodriguez's assistance, his color returning and his breathing more stable. Despite the medical episode and emotional stress of the evening, he looked directly at Mom for the first time in 16 years and spoke with quiet dignity. "You made your choice 16 years ago when you decided Derek's family was more important than your own son." Dad said, his voice carrying the weight of years of suppressed anger and disappointment. "I'm proud that I never poisoned Grayson against you, but you've done that job yourself tonight in front of everyone who matters to him." Dad's words hit exactly the right note, acknowledging his own integrity while highlighting Mom's self-destructive behavior. He had spent 16 years taking the high road, never speaking against Mom, despite having every right to expose her abandonment and manipulation. His restraint had protected me from additional pain while preserving the possibility of reconciliation, if Mom had ever genuinely sought it. The final collapse of Mom's position came when Derek stepped away from her entirely, his embarrassment obvious as he realized the full scope of her deception. "Linda, "We're leaving now," he said with cold finality. "I won't be part of whatever this has become, and I won't have my daughters associated with these kinds of threats and manipulation." Derek's rejection was particularly devastating to Mom because it came from someone who had benefited from her choices for 16 years. He had supported her decision to abandon me when it served his family's interests, but he had no patience for her current campaign of manipulation and greed. The twins were equally disgusted, complaining loudly about having their evening ruined by Linda's drama, and making it clear they wanted no part of her schemes. They had grown up viewing me as an inconvenience to their family stability, but even they recognized that Mom's behavior tonight had crossed lines they weren't comfortable with. Mom made one final attempt at manipulation, appealing to traditional concepts of family forgiveness and maternal bonds. She claimed she just wanted to rebuild their relationship and heal old wounds for the good of everyone involved. But her earlier threats and calculated behavior had revealed her true motivations too clearly for anyone to take these appeals seriously. I took the microphone back from Emma and looked directly at Mom as I delivered the words that should have been spoken years ago. "You lost the right to call yourself my mother the day you chose convenience over your child," I said with complete certainty. Family isn't about biology or legal rights. It's about showing up, staying present, and loving without conditions. I turned to address the entire reception, including Emma's extended family and my longtime supporters who had witnessed this strange evening of truth-telling and revelation. "I want to thank Paul Martinez for being both father and mother to me when I needed it most. I want to thank the Rodriguez family for teaching me what neighborhood support looks like. I want to thank Coach Martinez for showing me what mentorship means. Most importantly, I thanked Emma's family for demonstrating what real family love looked like and for welcoming me into their warm, chaotic, genuinely caring Italian-American household. The Castellis showed me what family dinners are supposed to feel like," I said, looking at Tony and Maria with deep gratitude. "They taught me that love is expressed through presence, not promises." I concluded by announcing that Emma and I would be starting our own family traditions based on loyalty, honesty, and actual presence, rather than biological obligation or social expectation. We would build our future around the people who had proven themselves through consistency, rather than those who demanded recognition based on DNA alone. Mom and Derek left the reception in defeat, their BMW pulling out of the gravel parking area, while the celebration continued around us. The twins complained about the wasted evening until they disappeared into the darkness, their voices fading as they returned to their privileged, insulated world. The rest of the reception took on a completely different energy, as if Mom's departure had lifted a psychological weight from the entire gathering. Dad danced with Emma while Tony taught me traditional Italian wedding songs. Maria packed leftover food for Mrs. Rodriguez and Coach Martinez, treating them like beloved family members rather than distant acquaintances. Emma and I shared our first married moments surrounded by people who had actually contributed to our ability to love and trust each other. We danced under the string lights while our real family celebrated around us, grateful for the clarity that had emerged from such an unexpected confrontation. The evening ended with profound emotional satisfaction, not because we had defeated an enemy, but because we had successfully defended the relationships that truly mattered. Mom's attempt to rewrite history and claim unearned credit had failed completely, while the people who deserved recognition had received it publicly and permanently. As Emma and I prepared to leave for our honeymoon the next morning, I realized that Mom's intrusion had actually been a gift in disguise. For 16 years, I had wondered if I was somehow responsible for her absence. Now everyone could see that her behavior reflected her character, not my worthiness of love. I learned that real family is built through daily choices rather than biological accidents. The people who raised me, supported me, and celebrated with me had earned their place in my life through consistency and care. Mom had forfeited her position through abandonment and manipulation, and no amount of legal threats or emotional blackmail could restore what she had willingly destroyed. Emma and I began our marriage with complete honesty about our families and complete clarity about our values. We promised each other that our future children would grow up surrounded by people who showed up consistently, rather than those who demanded recognition for minimal effort. The final life lesson was both simple and profound. You don't owe loyalty to people who abandoned you, regardless of their biological relationship to you. Family is created through love, sacrifice, and presence, not through DNA or legal documents. The people who deserve your time and emotional energy are those who have proven themselves worthy through their actions over years, not their demands over minutes. Our wedding day taught us that protecting yourself from toxic manipulation isn't selfish. It's necessary for building a healthy future with people who genuinely care about your well-being, rather than their own image or financial interests. I hope this story resonates with anyone who has struggled with family relationships that don't match society's expectations. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who demanded loyalty they hadn't earned? How do you balance forgiveness with self-protection when dealing with people who see relationships as opportunities for manipulation rather than genuine connection? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story helped you think about your own family dynamics, I'd be grateful if you would like this video and share it with others who might benefit from hearing about chosen family versus biological obligation. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself and building authentic relationships with people who deserve your trust. Thank you for listening to this deeply personal story, and I wish you the courage to surround yourself with people who celebrate your happiness rather than those who try to claim credit for your success. Remember that you deserve relationships built on genuine love and mutual respect, not guilt, obligation, or manipulation.